Robert E. Howard is one name that's extremely underrated when talking about a writer who can create great characters. He's written hundreds of stories during his short tenure and has created memorable characters that were quite relatable. All his characters were inspired by people around him, giving them a personal touch. For those who are wondering who Robert is, he is the writer who created the iconic character called Conan the Barbarian. It's agreed that this character is his most famous, but many are way more layered. So in today's edition, we'll discuss the badass characters of Robert E. Howard and how they defined the pulp fiction genre and found their place in pop fiction as well. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Conan the Barbarian, the true alpha of the Hyborian universe, the greatest mercenary of all time. These are just some of the names Conan the Barbarian is known by. This iconic warrior made his debut in Weird Tales magazine in 1932. Conan was interesting for several reasons. First, he wasn't Robert E. Howard's first creation, but gladly became his most prized possession. Secondly, Conan's character is based on a couple of real-life personalities that Robert occasionally conversed with. Now, Conan is the most contradicting character you can find due to his beliefs. He's not technically good, he takes money to kill people, he wages war against kingdoms, and he was also a pirate and started out as a thief. So why did Robert create such a character? Let me tell you. During the 20s and 30s, people were bored after reading about morally great characters. Therefore, a switch was needed in the pulp fiction genre, and Robert provided it. Conan was born in the frozen land of Samaria. It's believed that this legendary warrior was born on the battlefield, and ironically, his entire life became a battle for survival. He starts out as a small-time thief, but his ambitions are king-size. Slowly, he rose up the ranks and became a mercenary. This helped him learn about the world as he traveled kingdoms and offered his services. After being a prominent mercenary, he had many warriors under his command, and Conan, being the cunning and arrogant person he was, attacked the strongest kingdom of the Hyborian age. After dealing defeat to the king of Aquilonia, Conan finally became a king. The miserable boy from the streets of Samaria finally ruled over the strongest kingdom. Maybe this is his legacy, and this is also the reason he became a pop culture icon. Conan's iconic persona was enough to grab the attention of Hollywood, and they came up with his first appearance in pop culture with the movie Conan the Barbarian, starring none other than the great Arnold Schwarzenegger. The movie was a commercial success and also gave rise to the sequel called Conan the Destroyer. There was a wave of Conan in pop culture, and Marvel Universe also decided to get in on the action. Conan the Barbarian issue number 1 was released in 1970 and became an instant hit. This gave rise to several sequels, and even a collaboration with the Avengers at one point, including Wolverine, Deadpool, and Doctor Strange. Wow! Now that's the collaboration that blew everyone away. But you may be wondering how Conan will hold his own with powerful superheroes like Wolverine and Doctor Strange. For that, we need to check out his skills and abilities. Although Conan has no superhuman abilities, he makes up for it with his survival instincts and leadership abilities. Also, he's a master swordsman and is often compared with the greats like King Arthur. But if you take his broadsword away, he can easily beat you to a pulp with his bare hands. Robert E. Howard hit the jackpot after creating a character like Conan. He was relentless and cunning, but also had a good heart. He was the hero people needed and not what they wanted. Conan also gave rise to many iconic characters by Robert E. Howard, which we will discuss further in this video. Kull of Atlantis. One of the initial characters of Robert E. Howard, Kull of Atlantis was the hero Howard wanted to be. Created in 1929, 3 years before Conan the Barbarian, Howard believed that Kull would be his greatest character. This character had everything, from a rags-to-riches story to the intricate, detailed world of the Thurian Age during the prime of Atlantis. So why did it fail? And why did Howard love the character so much? Let's find out. Kull of Atlantis had a terrible time growing up. He was born in the Tiger Valley of Atlantis, but it soon flooded when he was still young. He was then taken in by the sea monster tribe, but they banished him, making him an outcast. But Kull always held on to the hope and strived to be better. He was captured by the kingdom of Valusia and served as a gladiator for them. At that time, no one would believe that this gladiator would rule the same kingdom he was fighting for. He soon became popular through his leadership and gained the support of many. After acquiring his freedom from Valusia, Kull of Atlantis used his cunning and strategic thinking to overthrow the current regime and eventually became the king of Valusia. Unlike Conan the Barbarian, Kull of Atlantis was a philosophical king. Imagine Marcus Aurelius combined with a gladiator. This made him a man of wisdom and also a favorite for many, including Robert E. Howard. His true powers and abilities come from his philosophical insight, but that does not mean he wasn't competent enough. In fact, Kull was one of the biggest gladiators in the Valusian Empire, and people feared fighting him, and his thorough intelligence was something else. Although Kull wasn't as famous as Conan, he can still hold his own in pop culture. The character made his first live-action appearance in the movie Kull the Conqueror, released in 1997. Kull is also the second Howard character that made its mark in pop culture and starred in the Marvel Universe and the Dark Horse comics. It's also believed that Conan is a descendant of Kull the Conqueror, making Kull the ultimate character by Robert E. Howard. Sadly, there's no evidence to prove that, as they lived centuries apart. Solomon Kane, the instrument of God's vengeance who will right all the wrongs in the world. This character will chase you down from the depths of the world if you've done something wrong. Born during the 16th century, Kane has a fascinating storyline and was purposely created by Robert E. Howard as a true fanatic. Howard has always created extraordinary characters, and Solomon Kane is just that. Unlike many characters during that time, Kane is motivated by self-righteousness and wanders the world providing justice. There's almost a sense of Puritan fanaticism that drives him. Kane truly believes that he is sent by God to be an instrument of vengeance. But how did he become such a strong character? Well, he started out in the merchant army and wanted to get out of England due to religious persecution. There he learned all the skills required to provide justice. Following many years as a buccaneer in Spain, Solomon Kane became a sombering individual who had just one goal: to provide justice. He was also one of the greatest swordsmen in Europe and had great knowledge about the supernatural. His adventures helped him acquire the legendary Staff of Solomon, which helped him slay many supernatural monsters. And guess what? This iconic staff is the same staff used by Moses and the priests of Bast during ancient Egypt. Solomon Kane had a relative influence on pop culture. His first appearance came in a poem by Robert E. Howard titled Homecoming, and a pulp fiction comic called Red Shadows. Similarly, Kane and his fanaticism also found a way into Marvel Comics as well as the Dark Horse comics. Kane has also blessed the theaters in a movie with his own name released in 2009. Solomon Kane is an extraordinary character that's completely different from Robert E. Howard's other creations. Howard wanted to explore humanity, justice, and redemption through the lens of Kane, and he succeeded in doing that. His action-packed adventures are still full of wisdom. Valeria. Valeria was one of the first female characters that Robert E. Howard created, and it gave rise to many more female-centric characters. She was a breath of fresh air in a male-dominated world and provided great stability to Conan. Valeria first made her debut in 1936 for the comic Red Nails. There, she was a pirate in an organization called the Red Brotherhood. Her character is based on real-life pirates like Ledgerda and Anne Bonny. The reason she became popular was her association with Conan the Barbarian. While everyone feared the legendary warrior, Valeria saw him as an equal. In the Red Nails, their shared prowess and mutual respect add great depth to both of their characters. Valeria has sailed the high seas and had many adventures. She's a capable warrior and also a master strategist. Her pop culture journey was truly dependent on Conan, as she made various appearances in the Conan comics published by Marvel. She also featured in the blockbuster movie Conan the Barbarian. Played by Sondal Bergman, this version of Valeria is a love interest to Conan, but according to Robert E. Howard's creation in Red Nails, he didn't seek out a relationship between them. Valeria quickly became a fan favorite due to her individualistic personality and the wisdom she had. Her badass attitude was the primary force behind her popularity. Bran Mak Morn. Bran Mak Morn is an interesting creation by Robert E. Howard. This nomadic tribal leader was the last king of the Picts people. Through him, we get to learn so much about the Picts and how they function. According to the timeline, they came centuries after the fall of Atlantis and primarily lived in the grasslands of Scotland and bred with the locals. But Bran didn't exactly resemble the Picts from that time. Instead, he looked like a true Pict with a tall stature and overall a better warrior. The Picts were in the Dark Ages, and all hope was lost for them. But Bran, being the true leader he was, fought for them until the end. He gave his life for the service of his people and always encouraged them to be individualistic and rely more on innovation instead of the old ways. Sadly, his intuition and wisdom were of no use, as he was made into a god and worshipped by his people after his death. He was called the Dark Man, and even a cult survived in his name, which was later known as the Children of the Night. This is interesting because a Lovecraftian horror story was published by the same name. And what's even more interesting is that Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were really good friends and shared several letters during their lifetime. Bran Mak Morn is somewhat of an underrated hero who didn't have an exposure to pop culture. Instead, he'll always be remembered as a tragic warrior who always fought for the welfare of his people. Red Sonja of Rogatino. One thing that always stands out in Robert E. Howard's work is his use of real historical events to frame his stories. He did something similar for the short story called The Shadow of the Vulture. This is the story that introduced us to the fearless character of Red Sonja. She is portrayed as a gun-wielding warrior who has the sole purpose of defeating the Ottoman Sultan known as Sultan the Magnificent. She is of Ukrainian-Polish origin, and her story is centered around the siege of Vienna in 1529. Now, you may be wondering how a character from Ukraine has the ultimate enemy from the Ottoman Empire. The reason being, she's actually the sister of the Sultan's favorite harem girl known as Hurrem Sultan. Small world, right? Red Sonja of Rogatino was known for her fiery red hair and also her fiery temper. She often got into a fight with her superiors and always believed in her own instincts. Red Sonja became instantly popular, and the writers decided to include her in the stories of Conan as well. But that wasn't possible due to the different timelines. So they did the next best thing and slightly changed her name to Red Sonja with a J instead of Red Sonja with a Y. Now, Red Sonja is the same character, but she's featured in the Hyborian Age and often assists Conan in his quests. Following her Marvel Comics adventure, she became insanely popular, which gave way for a live-action adaptation called Red Sonja. It featured Bridget Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger in titular roles. Red Sonja of Rogatino was loved for being an independent warrior and inspired many people to do the same. Her fearless attitude and skills in various forms of combat made her a fierce enemy to pick a fight with. Thulsa Doom. Robert E. Howard himself believed that Kull of Atlantis and Conan the Barbarian were his strongest characters. Therefore, they had no competition and were always ahead of their enemies. Or were they? Because we finally have a competitor, and it's none other than Thulsa Doom. Now, this powerful wizard had the guts and skills to oppose both Conan as well as Kull, and gave them a hard time. He was the main antagonist of the movie Conan the Barbarian, and was a powerful undead wizard in the Kull stories written by Robert E. Howard. What were his powers that helped him oppose both these iconic heroes? Let's find out. Thulsa Doom has a vast knowledge of dark and ancient powers that makes him one of the strongest villains of the Howard universe. He's also an immortal being and can't be defeated with conventional weapons like swords and bullets. Sticks and stones won't break his bones, but a slash to the neck can do the work. That's exactly what Conan did in the movie Conan the Barbarian. After Thulsa had slain Conan's entire family through occult magic and hypnosis, Conan decided to get back at him and attacked his temple where he was addressing his cult. After defeating the guards one by one, he made his way to Thulsa and slashed his neck. But he didn't stop there. Conan also held his head high, showing everyone what happens when you follow a maniacal cult leader. After going head-to-head with some of the most famous heroes of the Howard universe, it's safe to assume that Thulsa Doom can be a fearful enemy due to his immortality and the chaotic snake cult. Dark Agnes de Chastillon, the dark mistress of death who fought against patriarchy and rose in a male-dominated society. These words are enough to describe the brave and fearless Dark Agnes de Chastillon. Born in 16th century Italy, she was beaten and forced by her father into an arranged marriage. But Agnes had big ambitions, so she killed her bridegroom and ran towards her bright future. She later found a mentor in Guiscard de Clisson, who taught her many skills, including swordsmanship. But later, Clisson died in her own arms, inspiring her for a life of adventure and thrills. Now, her story is similar to that of Red Sonja, but unlike her, Agnes's skills come from discipline and hard work instead of being a divine gift. She had famous adventures throughout Italy and the Mediterranean region and always fought for the welfare of the people. Her long list of abilities, including fencing, marksmanship, and swordsmanship, helped her greatly throughout her adventures. While she's not as recognized as some of Howard's other characters, Dark Agnes de Chastillon was a great example of a strong female character and Howard's ability to craft dynamic characters with the help of a historic backdrop. John Kirwan. John Kirwan served as a breath of fresh air among the many characters of Robert E. Howard. Instead of being this alpha warrior, John was a more intellectual personality who always sought out more knowledge. His thirst for occult knowledge led him to many places in the world, including the Wanderers Club in America. What's even more interesting is that John is one of the only few characters that were set in recent times during the release, which was the 1930s. He was an introverted character whose only gateway to communication was his twin sister. After surviving a strange childhood, John Kirwan wanted to learn about occult powers to counter these supernatural threats. He's also said to be a collaborative effort between two great writers, Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. His great knowledge of mystical and occult powers makes him an ideal character for a potential live-action adaptation between Howard and Lovecraft. Part of the Weird Menace storyline, John Kirwan's character was a testament to Howard's ability while writing about supernatural and occult behavior. Maybe his good friend H.P. Lovecraft even saw a competitor. Kirwan stands out as one of the most iconic characters of Robert E. Howard, as he's the perfect blend of his typical style and the more complicated supernatural genre. Sailor Steve Costigan. Sailor Steve Costigan is easily the most relatable and inspiring character of Robert E. Howard. This stubborn sailor has a sort of never-give-up attitude that makes us root for him. Another reason he's so popular is because of the underdog factor. It's a widely known fact that people always root for the underdog, and you might as well after reading the tales of Sailor Steve Costigan. Steve first appeared in Fight Stories magazine in 1929 and became a huge hit. He hails from Texas and has an Irish accent. He has an older brother who's a much better fighter than him, but he lacks Steve's resilience and never-give-up attitude. Steve Costigan travels the world in his beloved ship called the Sea Girl and is introduced to many adventures. His adventures were so good that Sailor Steve Costigan soon became Howard's most profitable character, and it's all because of his relatable personality. Our guy can never get a girl, is always insulted and punished, and he's always looked down upon. But this inspirational character never loses his charm and smile. He keeps moving on and takes on difficult challenges. Maybe that's what Robert E. Howard wanted to tell us, to keep us moving on despite the odds stacked against us. Steve Harrison. Steve Harrison is Robert E. Howard's attempt at cracking the detective noir genre. He frequently talked a lot about his inability to crack this subject in his letters to H.P. Lovecraft. However, he finally succeeds, and we're introduced to the angry young man called Steve Harrison. This gritty and relentless character operates in the Chinatown district of an unnamed American city. Harrison has a no-nonsense approach and is quick to draw his hands during an investigation. He's also competent enough and can deal heavy damage to many opponents. He first appeared in the Strange Detective Stories in 1934 and became a decent hit. Another reason for the success can be the unusual blend between the detective and supernatural genre. The thing is, Steve Harrison didn't just investigate normal cases, but also took part in weird supernatural and scary cases. He had great knowledge of occult behavior and always found a way against them. This set of stories gave rise to a new pulp fiction genre combining detective with horror. Although Steve Harrison didn't enjoy popular success like some of these other characters, he does have a niche audience, including readers who love exploring supernatural events with a keen eye for investigation. Serpent Men. Ever heard about the conspiracy of lizard people and how they control our world through a secret organization? Robert E. Howard thought the same and came up with the sinister race of Serpent Men. Now, they have an interesting storyline. Prevalent since ancient times, the Serpent Men ruled the planet and were later overthrown by humans. Since then, they've been plotting and trying to regain their powers. Featuring first in the Weird Tales comics, Serpent Men were a quick hit and even appeared in the storyline involving Kull of Atlantis and Conan the Barbarian. These shape-shifting reptilian creatures can mimic humans and have a strong foothold in secret organizations. They also have the ability of mind control and hypnosis, and often use their wealth to manipulate people. Sounds like another mysterious cult that we know. Anyways, Serpent Men were a huge hit, and even featured in various editions of Marvel Comics and posed as an adversary to Conan the Barbarian. They were also part of an animated series with the same name. The Serpent Men helped Robert explore the mythos behind conspiracy and the belief that everyone is controlled by a secret organization looking to manipulate our world. Marvelous verdict. After looking at this list of diverse characters, it almost seems impossible that Robert E. Howard was able to come up with these in just 7 years of writing. He has a popular character from each genre and is also regarded as the father of the sword and sorcery subgenre. Howard found success when he was 23 and gave up his life when he was 30. The young and upcoming author died by suicide after his mother went into a coma and was not expected to wake. It's also believed that he had many mental problems which could have contributed to his death. Although Robert E. Howard left the world early, his characters are still with us, and many more comics and live-action movies are being made. Howard was a true visionary, and his legendary characters are witness to that. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.